Welcome to Terrormouth, where the night doesn't just hold secrets, it remembers them. Story 1 ** The carolers who came after midnight USA. Pine Hollow looked like the kind of town people invented when they wanted to sell a feeling. Snow sat on rooftops in neat white layers. Strings of warm lights draped every porch rail like they'd been measured with a ruler. Wreaths were the same size, the same shade of green, the same red ribbon tied in the same perfect bow. Even the street lamps had matching garlands, all identical. It wasn't charming, it was controlled. I hadn't been back in 8 years. The road into town narrowed as it climbed through pine trees. The forest pressed close on both sides, dark trunks and heavy branches sagging under fresh snow. The air looked thicker than it should have, like the cold itself had substance. When I passed the Welcome to Pine Hollow sign, my phone dropped from full signal to nothing in a blink. No bars, no data, no emergency call symbol, just dead. I told myself it was the mountains, the weather, old infrastructure. That's what you tell yourself when you're driving toward your childhood, and you don't want to feel fear before you even arrive. My mother's porch light was on. The house looked smaller than I remembered, but the windows still had those same candles in them, all lined up in a row. The driveway had been shoveled, but the snow along the edges was already piling up again. Pine Hollow didn't give you time to rest. Inside, the heat hit me like a wall. The air smelled like pine cleaner and cinnamon and something metallic under it, faint, like pennies rubbed between fingers. My mother opened the door before I knocked. Her hair was pulled back tight. Her eyes were rimmed with red, but her voice stayed level. "Come in," she said. "Shoes off, don't track snow." I did it automatically. I'd forgotten how quickly you fell back into old habits in that house. My father was in the living room recliner with a blanket tucked around him. His face looked wrong, like someone had loosened something important inside him. Half his mouth sagged. One eye blinked slower than the other. The television played a Christmas special on mute, bright laughing faces flickering across his blank stare. He turned when he saw me, and something passed through his expression, recognition, then pain. He tried to speak, but it came out as a wet sound he swallowed quickly. I sat with him until he slept. That first night, after my mother went to bed, I stayed up in the living room, not ready to close my eyes in my childhood home. Snow fell outside in steady sheets. The street lamp across the road threw a pale circle onto the snow, turning the flakes into glitter. Pine Hollow was quiet in a way cities never are. No distant sirens, no traffic hum, just the faint creak of the house settling and the occasional pop from the heating vents. At 11:47 p.m., the town carols stopped. It was subtle at first. I hadn't even noticed the music until it cut out. Pine Hollow always piped Christmas music through the public speakers in December, low and soft, like the town was humming to itself. I'd forgotten that, too. When it stopped, the silence felt like pressure. Then singing began, not from speakers, from the street. 5 voices, too flat, too slow, like people who didn't understand rhythm but were mimicking it. God rest the merry gentlemen. The sound reached through the glass, thin and cold. I stood and went to the window. They came down the street in a straight line, evenly spaced, their boots crunching in the snow in perfect time with the song. Their coats were long and dark, old-fashioned in shape, hanging stiffly like they were made from heavy wool that didn't bend. Scarves covered the lower halves of their faces, hats pulled low. I couldn't see skin, I couldn't see breath. Carolers should have looked festive. These looked like a funeral procession, pretending to be Christmas. They stopped at the Henderson house across the way. The Hendersons always had the brightest decorations. Their roof glowed. Their yard had inflatable snowmen and deer and an enormous lit-up sleigh. The song ended. The 5 figures stood still. No one came to the door. For a full minute, they didn't move. They didn't laugh. They didn't speak. They stood like statues, facing the Henderson house as if listening for something inside. Then, slowly, they turned. All 5 heads moved together, and they looked directly at my window. My stomach dropped so hard, it felt like it tried to leave my body. I stepped back into the dark of the living room. I told myself I was being dramatic. I was tired, stressed, grieving before grief had even fully arrived. When I looked again, the street was empty. No figures, no footprints, no sound. I stood at the glass for a long time, waiting for the crunch of boots to return. It didn't. The next morning, I asked my mother about it while she stirred coffee like she was trying to grind it into dust. "I saw carolers last night," I said casually. "Late, just before midnight." The spoon stopped. Her shoulders tightened. She didn't look at me. "What time?" she asked. "About 11:47, maybe later." Her eyes flicked up, sharp and frightened, then away again. She reached for sugar with hands that suddenly looked older than I remembered. "If they come," she said quietly, "you don't answer." I waited. Answer what? They didn't knock. She set the sugar down like it was heavy. "If they knock, if you hear them, if you think you hear them." "Mum, what is this? Some town tradition?" Her voice hardened. "It's a rule." A rule, of course. Pine Hollow was made of rules no one explained. I tried another angle. "Did Dad ever don't?" she snapped, then softened immediately like she regretted the tone. "Just don't." That afternoon, I went into town for groceries. Everyone was out, bundled in winter coats, moving between shops like they were performing normal life. But people avoided my eyes. If I smiled, I got a quick nod and nothing more. Conversations dipped when I walked near. It wasn't the usual small-town curiosity about a returning kid. It was avoidance, like my presence was a problem. At the register in the market, the cashier scanned my items and said, without looking up, "Back for Christmas." "Back for my dad," I said. Her hands paused. She finally looked at me. Her expression changed in a way I didn't like. Not sympathy, something closer to dread. "Keep your curtains closed," she said quietly. Then she went back to scanning items like she hadn't spoken. That night, my mother turned off every light downstairs at 10:30. She locked the front door, the back door, the side door, then checked them again. She pulled the curtains tight. Then she went to the mantel where an old brass bell sat beside a photo of me as a kid in a Santa hat. She picked up the bell and rang it once. A single clear chime. "What's that for?" I asked. Her jaw clenched. "So they know we're awake." That doesn't make sense. It doesn't have to. My father slept through all of it, his breathing slow and uneven. At 11:47, the town music stopped again. My skin prickled instantly, like my body had been trained to fear that moment. Then the singing started dot closer, right outside the house. 5 voices, the same flat tempo, the same wrong cadence. They weren't singing to entertain, they were chanting, "Hark the herald angels sing." The sound wasn't muffled by the walls the way it should have been. It was too clear, too intimate. 3 taps hit the front door. Tap, 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 perfect spacing, not casual knocking. Measured, my mother's eyes met mine. She didn't move, she didn't breathe. Another 3 taps. Tap, tap, tap. A voice spoke, gentle and cheerfully wrong. "Merry Christmas. We've come to sing." The doorknob turned dot. Slowly, I froze. The deadbolt was locked. I'd watched her lock it. The doorknob turned anyway, scraping faintly, like metal moving against something that should have resisted. My mother lifted one finger to her lips. The singing continued, louder now, as if the carolers were leaning into the door, pressing their faces against the wood. "Oh come, all the faithful." The hallway felt colder, not a draft, a sinking temperature, like the heat was being pulled out of the air. Then I heard it, my father's voice, from the living room. He was asleep in the recliner, but his voice joined the song, clear and steady, singing along with words I knew he couldn't have formed. After the stroke, he could barely shape a sentence, but he sang, and he sang in perfect rhythm with them. My mother's face shattered. For the first time, fear broke through her control. She grabbed my arm hard enough to hurt and dragged me toward the bathroom, the only room in the house without a window. "Don't look," she whispered harshly. "Don't listen, don't answer." Inside the bathroom, she flicked off the light, plunging us into darkness. I could still hear the singing through the walls, not fading, not muffled, as if the carolers were inside the tiles with us. The front door knob rattled again. Then came a sound that made my throat close. A soft, wet scrape, like something dragging across the wood from the outside. My mother leaned close, her breath shaking. "No matter what you hear," she whispered, "you keep your mouth shut." "Mum," I whispered back, "what are they?" Her answer came out like something she'd held in 4 years and hated letting free. "They're not people," she said. "They're reminders." The knocking stopped. The silence was worse. Then the voice came again, no longer cheerful. "We know you're in there." My mother's grip on my wrist tightened until my fingers tingled. A pause. Then a sound like laughter, but thin, like a person who'd only heard laughter described. "We can sing for hours," the voice said. "We can sing until you forget why you're afraid." The bathroom air felt smaller, claustrophobic. I tasted cold iron in the back of my throat. Then, from right outside the bathroom door, I heard footsteps. Slow, careful, a soft crunch, like snow being stepped on. Inside the hallway, my blood turned to ice. My mother pressed her palm over my mouth so hard I could barely breathe. The footsteps stopped at the bathroom door. Something leaned against it. Not heavy, not light, just presence. I felt a pressure through the wood, like someone resting their forehead there, listening. Then, in a voice that sounded like my own, it whispered my name. Not from the hallway, from inside the bathroom, right behind my ear. And I realized the carolers weren't trying to get into the house. They were already in it. I didn't scream, even though every nerve in my body demanded it. The whisper of my name came again, closer this time, the sound forming inside the small space like breath against skin. My mother's hand flew from my mouth to my shoulder, gripping hard, anchoring me. Her face in the dark was pale, eyes wide, lips moving silently. A prayer, maybe, or a warning she didn't dare voice. The pressure against the bathroom door shifted. Something slid down the woods slowly, deliberately, like it was lowering itself to listen better. Then the singing started again. Not outside, not in the hallway, inside the walls. The sound vibrated through the pipes, the tiles, the mirror. The melody stretched and warped, voices overlapping in ways human throats couldn't manage. "Oh come, let us adore him." I squeezed my eyes shut and pressed my back into the cold tub. The air felt heavy, thick, like it had weight. Every breath tasted wrong. My father's voice rose above the others again. "Open the door," it said gently. "You don't have to be afraid." Tears burned behind my eyes. He hadn't said my name like that since I was a kid. Not even before the stroke. My mother shook her head fiercely, mouthing, "Don't listen." A soft knock tapped the bathroom door. Not from the hallway. From the inside. 3 taps. Tap, tap, tap. I bit down on my tongue to keep from making a sound. The knocking stopped. The pressure lifted. Footsteps retreated, slow and patient, fading back into the house. The singing followed them, drifting away room by room until it slipped through the front door and vanished into the cold night. We stayed there long after the silence settled, afraid to trust it. When my mother finally opened the bathroom door, the hallway was empty. The living room lights were off. The front door stood closed, locked, exactly as we'd left it. My father slept in his chair, mouth slightly open, television flickering softly. No sign he'd ever spoken. But the Christmas tree lights were unplugged again. The cord lay coiled neatly beside the outlet. The next morning, Pine Hollow looked like a town in mourning. No decorations, no music, no people lingering outside. Curtains drawn tight, doors locked despite the daylight. At noon, the church bell rang once. That was how people found out. The Miller house on the far end of town hadn't answered their door. When the sheriff went inside, he found the entire family sitting at the dining table, for chairs, for plates, for glasses filled with melted snow. No injuries, no struggle. Their mouths were open, frozen in the shape of song. In the center of the table sat 5 burned down candles. My mother finally told me everything that night. Pine Hollow had learned the hard way generations ago. The first winter the carolers appeared, people thought it was a joke. Travelers, drifters, something harmless. They opened their doors. By spring, half the town was gone. Not dead, not missing. Gone in a way that left houses standing, clothes folded, food half-cooked on stoves. The survivors made rules. Lights off before midnight. Doors locked. No answering voices you recognized after dark. No singing back. Never, ever invite them in. They come every Christmas, my mother said, staring at the floor. They walk the town and listen. They look for houses that still believe Christmas is safe. What are they? I asked. She shook her head. They're what's left of the ones who opened the door first. On Christmas Eve, the town went completely dark. No porch lights, no decorations, no Pine Hollow disappeared into the snow. At 11:47 p.m., the silence returned. Then the singing. This time, it circled the house. Not knocking, not testing the door. Waiting, a new voice joined them. Familiar, too familiar. My own, let them in, it said from outside. It's cold, I stood frozen, listening to myself beg. My mother rang the bell on the mantel once. The singing stopped abruptly. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then footsteps retreated into the snow. Christmas morning came quietly. No deaths, no missing families. The town survived another year. I left Pine Hollow the next day. My mother hugged me tightly, whispered, "Don't come back in December." I never have. But every Christmas, just before midnight, my phone loses signal for a few minutes. And sometimes, through the silence, I hear singing, soft, patient, waiting for someone, somewhere, to forget the rules and open the door. Story 2. The last gift left in Frostwood, Canada. Frostwood didn't feel like a real town when I first arrived. It felt staged. Every house at the same distance from the road. Every fence stood at the same height. Even the snow looked evenly distributed, as if someone had gone out of their way to make sure no drift grew too large. The place sat deep in northern Ontario, far enough that cell service vanished 20 minutes before you reached it. One road in, one road out. Forest on all sides. I came because I needed somewhere quiet. Somewhere cold enough to numb things. My divorce had finalized in October. By December, the silence in my apartment had become unbearable. Frostwood advertised itself as peaceful, tight-knit, traditional. That sounded safe. The realtor smiled too much when she handed me the keys. "You'll be here in time for Christmas," she said. That's when Frostwood really shines. The house I rented was small. 1 floor, 2 bedrooms, a porch that creaked when you stepped on it. The previous tenant had left a wreath hanging on the door, dried pine needles shedding onto the mat. I almost took it down. I didn't. My first few weeks passed quietly. People waved. People nodded. Nobody lingered. Conversations stayed names, weather, road conditions. Nothing personal. Then December 23rd arrived. That afternoon, my neighbor knocked on my door. Her name was Elaine. Late 50s. Pale hair pulled tight. She smelled faintly of peppermint and something medicinal. "Just making sure, you know," she said. "Don't stay up late tomorrow." I raised an eyebrow. "Because of Santa." Her laugh came a second too late. "Because of the gift," she said. "What gift?" "The Christmas gift," she replied, like it was obvious. "Everyone gets one." I waited for her to explain. She didn't. "You'll understand," she added. "Just don't watch." "Watch what?" She stepped back onto her porch. The giving, that night, I lay awake thinking about it. Frostwood had traditions. I'd seen the notice board at the general store. Carol nights, candle walks, communal dinners, but no one had mentioned gifts. On Christmas Eve, the town shut down early. By 5 p.m., shops were closed. By 7, the streets were empty, curtains drawn, porch lights off. By 10, Frostwood felt abandoned. I poured a drink and sat on the couch, snow piling against the windows. The silence wasn't peaceful. It pressed in, the kind of quiet that makes you hyper-aware of your own breathing. At exactly 12:14 a.m., I heard footsteps, not on the road. On my porch, slow, careful, unhurried. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. A soft thump followed, like something being set down. Then the footsteps retreated. I waited. 30 seconds. A minute 5. When I finally opened the door, a small box sat on my welcome mat, wrapped in plain brown paper, red twine tied perfectly around it. No name, no tag, no footprints. The box was ice, not winter cold, deep cold, like it had been kept somewhere unnatural. Carried it inside and set it on the kitchen table. I told myself I wouldn't open it. I did anyway. Inside was a snow globe. It showed my house. Every detail was perfect. The crooked step, the loose shutter, even the light I'd left on in the living room glowed faintly inside the globe. When I shook it, the snow didn't fall. It rose. I slammed the lid shut and shoved the box into a drawer. The next morning, Frostwood buzzed with forced cheer. People smiled too widely, asked one question over and over. What did you get? No one described their gift. They just asked if you'd received it. When I didn't answer, they stopped asking. That night, I dreamed of standing outside my house, watching someone move through the rooms, watching myself sleep. When I woke, the drawer was open. The snow globe sat on the kitchen table. Inside it, footprints marked the snow, leading from the edge of the globe to the front door. At 11:58 p.m., my power went out. Outside, footsteps returned. This time, they didn't stop at the porch. They circled the house, slowly, patiently. And when I looked into the snow globe again, the tiny front door opened. Something stepped inside. Behind me, in the dark kitchen, I heard the same sound. A careful step on hard wood. I didn't turn around. That careful step behind me sounded too deliberate to belong to anything human. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't sneaking. It was confident. Like whoever or whatever had entered my house knew there was nowhere else for me to go. The floorboard creaked again. Closer, I stared at the snow globe on the table. Inside it, the tiny version of my living room light flickered once, then went out. The miniature house was now dark. So was mine. The air dropped several degrees all at once. My breath fogged, though the windows were closed and the heater had been running earlier. I could smell snow. Fresh, sharp, clean. The smell you only get outside. Far from buildings, another step. I forced myself to move. Slowly, I reached for the drawer where I'd shoved the box earlier and pulled it open. Empty, the paper and twine were gone. Only the snow globe remained on the table, perfectly centered, like it had been placed there on purpose. "Don't look at it," Elaine had said. "Don't watch." Too late. Something brushed past my shoulder. Not touching, but close enough that the air shifted. I felt pressure, like standing beside a large animal in the dark. The voice that spoke wasn't loud. It wasn't threatening. It sounded tired. "You opened it." I turned. The kitchen was empty, but the voice came again. Now from the hallway. "We don't like it when they open it." My heart pounded so hard, I felt dizzy. "Who are you?" I asked, my voice shaking despite my effort to keep it steady. A pause. Then, softly, "We're what's left." The footsteps moved again, passing the hallway, heading toward the living room. I followed without thinking, staying close to the wall, afraid to cross the open space. The Christmas lights on the tree flickered back on by themselves. Under their glow, I saw the wet footprints on the floor. They weren't boots. They weren't bare feet either. They were wrong, too long. Toes pressed together like they'd never been meant to spread apart. They stopped in front of the tree. "I didn't mean to," I said. "I didn't know. That's what they always say," the voice replied. A shape began to form near the tree, not appearing all at once. It gathered slowly, like darkness deciding to take shape. Taller than me, narrow, wrapped in something that might once have been a coat. Where its face should have been, there was frost. Thick and opaque, like ice on a window you couldn't see through. "We were given gifts once too," it said. "Long before you." The room shifted. For a moment, the walls felt farther away, the ceiling higher. The house stretched, becoming unfamiliar. I saw Frostwood as it used to be, smaller, rougher, fewer houses. People standing outside on Christmas morning, smiling as they opened identical boxes, laughing, thanking someone who never appeared. They told us it was tradition, the thing said. They told us it meant belonging. The images changed. The smiles faded. The laughter turned strained. We opened ours, it continued, and we kept opening them. Every year, the snow globe on the table began to shake inside it. The tiny version of me stood frozen in the living room. We stayed, the thing said. That was the mistake. The shaking stopped. The thing turned its head toward me. The frost cracked slightly, revealing darkness beneath. You still have a choice. I swallowed. What happens if I don't? Silence. Then the truth, spoken without cruelty. You'll belong, and if I do. The thing looked back at the snow globe. Then Frostwood will forget you. The power snapped back on. Lights flooded the house. The Christmas tree sparkled brightly. The footprints were gone. The air warmed in seconds, like nothing had happened. I stood alone in my living room. The snow globe was still on the table, perfectly still at dawn. Frostwood looked relieved. People smiled normally again. Shop lights came on. The bakery reopened. Elaine knocked on my door just after 9. You made it, she said quietly. I didn't open it again, I replied. Her shoulders sagged with something like relief. Then you should leave. I can't just. You can, she said. And you should. Today, what happens if I stay? She glanced down the street, then back at me. You'll get another gift next year. And the year after that. And one day, you won't even wonder who leaves them. I packed within an hour. Before I left, I wrapped the snow globe back in its paper and twine and placed it on the kitchen table. When I stepped outside, the road out of Frostwood was already being plowed, snow clearing quickly, eagerly. I never looked back. Months later, I received a package with no return address. Inside was a photograph. My old house in Frostwood, dark, empty, no lights, no footprints. On the back, written in careful red ink, were 4 words: thank you for leaving. I burned the photo every Christmas since. I turn off my lights before midnight, and when I hear footsteps outside, I don't look, because I know Frostwood is still giving gifts, and someone, somewhere, is opening theirs for the first time. Story 3, asterisk, the Christmas shift, no one survived. UK, the power outage hit without drama, no sparks, no alarms, just a sudden absence of sound, like someone had pressed mute on the world. The monitors went black. The fluorescent lights overhead died mid. The low electrical hum that had been sitting under everything since I arrived vanished. I stood there in the dark control room, listening to my own breathing. Outside, snow continued to fall. I could see it faintly through the window, catching what little ambient light the clouds allowed. Thick flakes, too steady, too deliberate. I reached for my phone, no signal, not even emergency call. The radio in my hand crackled once, then went silent. I shook it gently. Nothing. Dead. That should have made me feel better. If the radio was dead, the voice couldn't come back. But then I heard footsteps, not inside, outside the building, slow crunches through snow, carried clearly through the thin walls. One set at first, then another, then several, all out of sync, circling the perimeter like they were inspecting it. I moved toward the window and wiped a circle in the fogged glass with my sleeve by the fence. Shapes moved, High-visibility vests caught what little light there was, flashing pale yellow against the dark. They stood too still when they stopped, too evenly spaced, all facing the building. None of them spoke. None of them used torches. They didn't need to. I stepped back as something heavy hit the fence. Not a crash, a controlled impact. Then another testing that I backed toward the desk, heart pounding, and felt my heel hit something on the floor. The logbook, I hadn't dropped it. I was sure I'd left it on the desk. Now it lay open at my feet. The last entry wasn't mine. 105 shift ongoing. Power unstable. 112 units responding. 117. Control acknowledged the handwriting. Matched mine. The times hadn't happened yet. My stomach twisted. I heard the radio click. Static crept back in. Thin and breath-like. Then the voice returned. .com, familiar. Power always drops around now, it said. Gives you time to think. I didn't answer. The footsteps outside stopped all at once. You're doing well, the voice continued. Most panic by now. I clenched my jaw so hard my teeth hurt. Do you remember what Colin said? It asked. About not leaving the building. I swallowed. The voice lowered, almost conspiratorial. He didn't say why. A new sound joined the static, a soft scraping, metal on concrete. I turned toward the corridor camera monitor by instinct, then remembered the screens were dead. The scraping continued. Anyway closer, like something being dragged. Slowly along the floor outside the control room, the radio crackled again. We keep them busy, the voice said. That's the job. A shape passed the window, close, too close. A face turned toward the glass. My face, it leaned in slightly, peering through the dark like it expected me to wave back. Its mouth moved, but no sound came from it. The voice still came through the radio instead. You see, it said, Greymore doesn't lock things away. The shape outside lifted one gloved hand and pressed it. To the window, frost bloomed outward from the contact point instantly. Spider webbing across the glass in delicate white veins. It keeps them, the voice finished. The frost crept faster, racing toward the edges of the window. I stumbled back, breath fogging violently in the suddenly cold air. The building groaned. Not settling noises, not wind, structural strain. I heard something slam against a storage unit door somewhere down the corridor. Then another. A chain rattled violently. The radio clicked again. They get restless on Christmas, the voice said. They remember being invited places. A memory surfaced uninvited. Colin's smile. Too tight. His hesitation when I asked about emergencies. No patrols tonight. No, one survives the night. The lights flickered back on suddenly, harsh and blinding. The monitors rebooted one by one, filling the room with blue glow. Every camera feed showed the same thing. Storage. Unit doors open. All of them. Inside each unit stood a person wearing a high visibility vest. All identical. All facing the camera. All me. Some were smiling, some weren't. Radio crackled warmly. Time to do your rounds, my voice said gently, before they decide to come in on their own. The control room door handle rattled once, then again, slow, deliberate, and someone on the other side of the door whispered my name in perfect imitation of my own voice. The door didn't burst open. That was the worst part. It eased inward slowly, hinges barely whispering, like whoever was on the other side didn't want to startle me, like they were being polite. I stepped back until my shoulders hit the wall behind the desk. The room felt too small now, the ceiling lower than before. The monitors glowed with rows of my own face staring back at me, each version frozen in a different expression: fear, calm, curiosity, relief. The door opened wide enough for a figure to step through. It wore my vest, my boots, my jacket. It even walked the way I did when I was tired, but it didn't breathe. I could see that immediately. No rise and fall in its chest, no fog in the cold air. It stopped just inside the doorway and looked around the room, not with surprise, but with familiarity, like it was checking something it owned. Behind it, more shapes crowded the corridor. I could see flashes of yellow fabric, reflective stripes catching the light as they shifted and leaned. Waiting their turn, the radio crackled softly on the desk. "You can relax," my voice said from the speaker. "This is the easy part." I shook my head. "I'm not going out there," I said. My voice sounded small in the room. The thing wearing my face tilted its head, exactly the way I did when someone disappointed me. "You already are," it replied, its mouth moving this time. The sound didn't come from its throat. It came from everywhere else. The monitors changed. The camera feeds flickered, then showed something else. Old footage, grainy, black and white. Men in flat caps and heavy coats, unloading crates from trucks. The same storage facility, decades earlier. The same fence. The same concrete walls. Different faces. Same vests. A Christmas tree stood in the background, bare and sad, propped up near the control room. "They started it during the war," the voice said. "Temporary holding. Things that didn't fit anywhere else." The footage jumped. Another Christmas. More crates. More men. They learned quickly, the voice continued. "Some things don't stay contained. Some things copy." The image shifted again. A younger Colin stood in the control room, thinner, nervous, signing paperwork with shaking hands. Across from him sat someone who looked exactly like him, smiling patiently. My stomach dropped. "The shift," the voice said. "One night a year. Someone stays. Someone leaves." The thing in front of me took a step closer. Its eyes were wrong up close. Not empty, too full. Like something was packed in behind them, pressing outward. "You don't kill us," it said calmly. "You replace us." I backed along the wall, searching for anything that might help. The emergency alarm button, the fire extinguisher, the door behind the desk. The doubles in the corridor leaned forward as one, listening. "You were chosen because you fit," the voice went on. "No family nearby. No one who'll ask too many questions. A clean ledger." "That's not true," I said. I have the thing smiled. "Not here," it said. "Not tonight." The radio clicked again. "Christmas resets the system," the voice explained. "Old balances. Old rules. Someone has to mind the doors while the rest of us go back in." The thing reached out and placed a hand on the desk. Frost spread instantly from its fingers, crawling over the surface, climbing the radio, creeping toward me. "Step outside," it said gently. "We'll take care of everything." The corridor filled with movement. The others pressed closer, their faces my face. Their eyes all fixed on me with identical expectation. I did the only thing I could think of. I grabbed the radio and smashed it against the wall. The speaker shattered. Sparks burst. The static screamed, then cut off completely. Every double flinched. The thing in front of me staggered, its smile cracking like porcelain. A sound tore out of it, not a scream, but a rush of overlapping voices, hundreds of them, layered and panicked. The frost on the desk melted instantly, flooding the floor with icy water. I ran not toward the corridor, toward the emergency exit at the back of the control room. The alarm screamed when I hit it, loud and raw, filling the building with sound. Red lights flashed. Somewhere deep inside the facility, doors slammed shut automatically. The doubles howled. The sound was inhuman now, stripped of my voice, stripped of pretense. The corridor erupted into chaos as they slammed into doors, into each other, into the walls. I burst out into the snow. The cold hit like a punch, but I didn't stop. I ran toward the gate, boots slipping, lungs burning. Behind me, the building shook violently, metal screaming as if something massive was throwing itself against the inside. The fence loomed ahead, locked. I slammed into it, shaking it with everything I had. The chain rattled but held behind me. The main doors of the facility bowed outward. Something enormous pressed against them from inside, stretching the metal, imprinting shapes that looked almost human. I climbed. The barbed wire tore at my gloves, my coat, my skin. I didn't feel it until later. I dropped on the other side and ran until my legs gave out. I woke up in a hospital bed on Christmas morning. Hypothermia, lacerations, shock. They told me the facility had suffered a structural failure, gas leak, electrical fault, total loss, no bodies found. Colin resigned quietly a week later, moved away, changed his name. Graymore hired a new security company. The storage facility reopened the following year. Every unit full, every Christmas Eve. The night shift is posted every Christmas morning. The position is vacant, and if you listen carefully, if you drive past the fence after midnight, you can still hear radios crackling inside, calling for someone to come check unit C17, using your voice, waiting for you to answer. Story for Asterisk: The night the snowplow never came, USA. The snowplow was supposed to come by midnight. That was the rule everyone in Blackridge lived by, even if no one ever said it out loud. The town clung to the side of the mountain like it was afraid to let go. One road in, one road out. When winter storms hit, that road decided whether Blackridge existed or not. The plow always came. It didn't matter how hard it snowed, how thick the ice got, or how loud the wind screamed through the pines. At some point before midnight, you'd hear it. The low diesel growl, the scrape of steel against frozen asphalt, headlights cutting through the white. That sound meant safety. The storm started early that year. 3 days before Christmas, snow began falling heavy and wet, sticking to everything it touched. By nightfall, the town looked buried, roofs sagging under weight, trees bending like they might snap. The wind drove snow sideways, rattling windows and shaking doors. By dusk, everyone knew it was going to be bad. Generators hummed to life. Radios were tuned low. People filled bathtubs with water, just in case. No one said what they were really thinking. At 11:30 p.m., Blackridge waited. Lights stayed on in houses up and down the road. Curtains were pulled back just enough to watch. Coffee was poured. No one went to bed. I stood at my living room window, staring at the curve in the road where the plow usually appeared. The forest beyond it was nothing but moving shadow, branches swaying violently under the weight of snow. At 11:58, the radio crackled, static at first. Then a voice. "Black Ridge residents," it said. "Please remain indoors. Plow is delayed." Delayed wasn't a word they used. The voice sounded wrong, too flat, like it was reading something it didn't understand. I turned the volume up. "Repeat," I said aloud. Even though I knew the radio couldn't hear me, the message didn't repeat. At 12:05, the scraping sound still hadn't come. I checked my phone. No signal. Not unusual during storms, but something about the blank screen unsettled me more than usual. I tried texting my neighbor anyway. Nothing sent. I turned on my porch light. The snow blew through its glow in thick sheets. Across the street, Mrs. Harlan's house sat completely dark. That wasn't right. She never turned her lights off during storms, ever. She once told me she'd lived through a winter blackout that killed her husband. After that, she kept every light on. Every night it snowed. I leaned closer to the glass. Something moved near her front door at first. I thought it was snow blowing in strange patterns, but then it straightened. It was tall, broad-shouldered, wrapped in what looked like a heavy coat who'd pulled low. Snow clung to it unnaturally, not melting, not sliding off. It didn't knock, it just stood there. Watching, a chill crawled up my spine. I raised my hand slightly. Unsure why, the figure didn't respond. It took one slow step forward. Snow didn't crunch beneath it. My porch light flickered once, then went out. At the same moment, the radio turned on by itself. "Remain indoors," the voice said again. "Assistance is on the way." Behind the figure, more shapes emerged from the storm. At least 4, maybe more. They stood in the road, spaced evenly, facing houses like they were counting them. None of them moved. I stepped back from the window, heart pounding. The radio crackled again. "Softer now. The plow is coming," the voice said. "It always comes." Outside, the figure in my yard lifted its head. There was no face under the hood, just darkness, deep and empty, like looking into a tunnel with no end. The thing tilted its head slightly, as if listening. Then, somewhere close, far closer than the road, I heard the sound of metal scraping ice. Not steady, not mechanical, slow, irregular, like something dragging a blade across the ground by hand. The sound moved closer, and the figures in the road began to walk. The figures moved with the storm. That was the first thing I noticed. They didn't fight the wind or lean into it. They drifted forward as if the blizzard was carrying them, guiding each step. Snow wrapped around their legs and shoulders, but never seemed to touch their faces. Not that there were faces to see. The scraping sound grew louder. It came from the road, not from an engine, not from a truck, from something being dragged. I stepped back from the window, my breath fogging the glass, my heart pounding so hard it felt like it might break through my ribs. The radio hissed again, then clicked. "Black Ridge residents," the voice said. "This is your final notice. Remain indoors." Final notice. I grabbed my coat and boots without thinking, then froze. The words my father used to say when storms came back to me, uninvited. "If the plow doesn't come, don't go looking for it." I stayed inside, across the street. Mrs. Harlan's front door opened. Slowly, a weak yellow light spilled out onto the snow. I watched in disbelief as she stepped onto her porch, wrapped in a robe, her grey hair loose around her shoulders. "Don't," I whispered, even though she couldn't hear me. One of the figures in the road turned toward her. It raised an arm, not to wave. To point, Mrs. Harlan squinted into the storm. She took one step forward, then another. The scraping sound stopped. For a moment, everything held still. Even the wind seemed to pause. Then the scraping resumed, closer now, accompanied by a deep, hollow groan that vibrated through the ground beneath my feet. The radio crackled violently. "Plow arriving," the voice said, strained now, almost panicked. "Plow arriving." Headlights burst through the snow at the far end of the road. Relief surged through me so fast it made my knees weak. But the headlights were wrong. They were too low, too wide, and they didn't bounce or sway the way headlights should on a mountain road. They glided forward smoothly, unnaturally steady. Behind them, something massive loomed. The figures in the road stepped aside, in perfect unison. The thing came closer. It was shaped like a snowplow in the loosest sense of the word. A hulking silhouette of rusted metal and ice, its blade scraping sparks from the frozen road. But there was no cab, no windshield, no driver where the front grille should have been. There was a cavity, deep, dark. Something moved inside it. Mrs. Harlan stood frozen in the road. Staring, the thing slowed. The scraping blade lifted slightly, like a mouth opening. I slammed my hands against the window and screamed her name. She turned her head just enough to look, back at her house, at the lights she'd left on, at the warmth she'd abandoned. The figures closed in around her. The plow lurched forward when it passed. The road behind it was perfectly clear. No snow, no ice, no Mrs. Harlan. The radio went silent. One by one, lights across Blackridge went out. Not power failure, intentional darkness, as if every house understood at the same time. I turned off my own lights and backed away from the windows. The scraping sound moved past my house. The ground trembled. The walls groaned. Cold seeped through the floorboards like water. I crouched in the hallway, holding my breath. Listening, the sound stopped right outside. A shadow passed over the front of the house, blocking out what little light remained. Something pressed against the door, not hard. Testing, the radio crackled one last time. "Thank you for your patience," the voice said. "The road is clear." Footsteps retreated. The scraping faded into the distance by dawn. The storm was over. The road out of Blackridge was perfectly plowed, clean, wide, safe. The sheriff called it an accident, hypothermia, disorientation. They never found the plow driver. They never found the truck. Blackridge doesn't wait for midnight anymore when storms come now. Everyone turns off their lights early. No one looks outside. No one listens for the plow, because the road will always be cleared. And if you watch closely, you might see what's dragging the blade this time. Still making room, still taking its due. Story 5. The Christmas lights stayed on. Australia, the town council insisted the lights stay on. That was the rule, even if no one remembered when it started or who had written it down. Every December, every house in Brackmere was required to keep Christmas lights on from sunset until sunrise. Not decorative lights, not festive displays, just illumination. Enough to be seen clearly from the street. Enough to make sure nothing was hidden. Brackmere sat on the southern coast, far enough from the cities to feel forgotten. In summer, tourists filled the harbour and cafes. In winter, the town hollowed out. Shops closed early, streets emptied by nightfall. The ocean became louder after dark, its constant crashing a reminder that the land ended abruptly just beyond the houses. I moved there in late November, chasing quiet. Remote work paid well, and Brackmere promised isolation without loneliness. The realtor mentioned the lights rule casually, like she was talking about bin collection. Council tradition, she said with a shrug, keeps everyone cheerful. I didn't question it. On December 1st, I understood how serious it was. At sunset, the town lit up. Not gradually, not house by house, almost all at once. White bulbs flared to life along roofs, windows, fences, sheds. Some houses used warm light, others harsh LED, but together it was blinding. From the hill above town, Brackmere looked like a landing strip. That night, I forgot to turn mine on. I was tired, unpacking, lost track of time. At 2:11 a.m., someone knocked, 3 knocks, firm, evenly spaced. I opened the door to an empty porch. No footprints, no sound of retreat. Just my porch light, now on, casting a harsh glow over the steps. I laughed, uneasy, and shut the door in the morning. A notice waited in my mailbox. Plain paper, no letterhead. Please keep lights on after dark. Community safety measure. No explanation that night. I plugged the lights in before sunset. The knocking stopped as December went on. I noticed how closely everyone followed the rule. Houses that were usually careless about maintenance suddenly had pristine strings of bulbs. Broken lights were fixed immediately. Even abandoned properties glowed at night. No one complained about the cost. No one joked about it anymore. On December 7th, Mrs. Halvorson's house went dark. She lived 2 doors down. A widow who fed stray cats and complained loudly about power bills. That night, her windows were black. Her porch unlit. It stood out immediately, like a missing tooth. I watched from my window. At 3 a.m., a council truck pulled up. No siren, no lights. 2 men stepped out. They didn't knock. They didn't go inside. They stood on her lawn for nearly 10 minutes. Facing the house by morning, she was gone. They said she'd left town suddenly. Her furniture stayed. Her garden tools stayed. Her cat bowl stayed on the porch that night. Her lights were back on. No one moved in. On December 10th, the O'Neill house went dark. This time, it happened just after midnight. I noticed because the sudden absence of light made the street feel wrong, like depth perception failing at 12:43 a.m. I heard movement outside. Not footsteps, shuffling, slow. Deliberate movement between houses. By dawn, the O'Neills were gone. No explanation, no police presence. Just silence. Their Christmas tree lights were on again by sunset. I stopped sleeping properly after that, at night. I sat by the window with my lights on, watching reflections ripple across the glass. Other houses glowed like stage sets, curtains drawn tight. Sometimes I thought I saw shapes moving inside rooms that should have been empty. At exactly 3 a.m. every night. The street felt different, quieter, heavier. That was when I started seeing the shadows. They didn't belong to people. They were too tall, too narrow. They slid between houses without disturbing anything, lingering near dark spots, testing windows, pausing as if listening. They never approach lit houses. On December 14, my lights flickered just once. I froze, heart hammering, staring at the bulbs until they stabilized. That night, I dreamed I was standing outside my own house, looking in through the window, watching myself sleep under the harsh glow of the lights, watching something else standing just out of view, close enough to touch the bed. When I woke, my bedroom door was open. I always closed it. On December 18th, the Christmas parade rolled through town. Music, smiles, council members waving from trucks decorated in lights, everyone pretending nothing was wrong. Above us, every roof glowed too bright. That night, at exactly 3 a.m., someone knocked on my door. A man stood there in a council jacket, clipboard in hand. "Just checking," he said calmly. "Your lights are on." Behind him, I saw others moving house to house, checking cords, switches, bulbs. "Why does it matter?" I asked. His smile never reached his eyes. "Because," he said softly, "dark houses draw attention." Behind him, at the far end of the street, something moved where the lights didn't reach. The bulbs above my door flickered, and for the first time since I moved to I wondered what would happen if I let them go dark. I did not turn the lights off that night. I stood in the kitchen at 3:01 a.m., staring at the switches, listening to the ocean pound the rocks beyond the houses. The bulbs hummed faintly, a sound I had never noticed before. It felt like standing under surveillance. Across the street, the Halverson house glowed empty. Curtains drawn, no movement, no life at 3:07. The shadows returned. They slid between houses, like stains drifting across glass. Tall, thin, their edges blurred, as if the light could not decide where they ended. They paused at dark corners and empty yards, then moved on, always avoiding the brightest places, always patient. My door handle rattled once, not a knock, not a test, a reminder. The next day, the town felt rehearsed. People smiled on cue. The council posted flyers about the Christmas Eve gathering by the harbor. Attendance encouraged. Lights mandatory. Safety first. I went to the council office after lunch. The building was all glass and white paint, bright even under cloud. Inside, a woman took my name and asked me to wait. She did not ask why I was there. A man arrived a few minutes later. Same council jacket as the one from my porch. Same calm smile. "You're adjusting," he said, like a doctor offering reassurance. "That takes time." "People are disappearing," I said. "They are leaving," he replied. "Some choose to, and the others," he looked past me to the window with a see-through white spray into the air. "The lights reduced risk." "From what?" "Attention," he said. "The wrong kind." I left without another word. That night was Christmas Eve. The town gathered by the harbor. Strings of lights stretched between poles, harsh and white. The water below was black. The wind carried salt and cold. At 2:55 a.m., the crowd thinned. People drifted home in small groups, never alone. No one lingered at 3 o'clock. The lights flickered across town once. Then again, the crowd froze. From the edge of the harbor, where the light ended, something moved. Not a shadow this time. A shape taller than a person, narrow as a post. It leaned toward the town as if listening. The councilman raised his hands. "Lights steady," he said calmly. Everyone remain illuminated. The bulbs brightened. The shape recoiled slightly, like it had been burned. A house near the cliffs went dark. Gasps rippled through the crowd. The shape turned. It crossed the ground without steps, gliding, closing the distance too fast to follow. The air grew cold. The ocean went quiet. From the dark house came a single sound, a door opening, then nothing. By dawn, the house glowed again. No one spoke about it. On Christmas morning, the town looked relieved. The rule had worked. Again, I packed my car before noon. As I drove out, I looked back once. Brackmere burned white against the grey sea, every bulb blazing in daylight. From the hill, the dark beyond the lights looked deep and endless. That night, far from the coast, I turned off every light in my house. Nothing happened, but sometimes, just before dawn, I wake with the certainty that if I had stayed, if I had ever let the lights go out, something would have noticed, and it would not have needed to knock.
Story 6. The Church That Kept Its Doors Open, Ireland. In Carrigmore, the church doors were never locked on Christmas. No one alive could remember a year when they had been. Midnight Mass was held no matter the weather. Snow, rain, wind off the box. The doors stayed wide open from the first bell to the last prayer. People said it was tradition. They said it was hospitality. But no one ever tried to close them to test if that was true. I came back to Carrigmore on December 22nd, after 12 years away. My mother had died suddenly in November. Heart failure, the doctor said. Quick, quiet, the kind of death people pretended was a blessing. The house was mine now, and I only planned to stay long enough to settle paperwork and leave before Christmas. That plan fell apart the first night. At 3:12 a.m., the church bell rang, just once, not the full peal, not a call to Massachusetts. A single low sound that rolled across the village and pressed itself into my chest. I lay awake in my childhood bedroom, staring at the ceiling, waiting for the second ring. It never came. The next morning, when I asked Maeve at the shop if anyone had died, she shook her head too quickly. Her smile never reached her eyes. She changed the subject and asked how long I was staying. When I said I hoped to leave before Christmas, she nodded like that was the sensible thing to do. The house felt wrong in the daylight. Too quiet. Too carefully kept. My mother's coat still hung by the door. Her shoes were lined up beneath it. In the kitchen, her notebook lay in the drawer where she kept shopping lists. At first, it looked ordinary. Milk, bread, call Maeve, pay electric. Then the writing changed. Keep the doors open. Do not lock them. Do not answer the knock. Do not go out alone after the bells. The words were written again and again across several pages, the pen pressing harder each time. The last entry was dated a week before she died. Christmas. Doors open. Please. I tried calling my cousin Owen that afternoon. He grew up 2 fields over. We had been close once. The call rang out. When I found him later outside the pub, he looked older than I remembered. Tired. Worn down. You staying for Mass? He asked. I'm not religious, I said. It doesn't matter, he replied. Just don't leave early. And don't stay late. I asked him what that meant. He looked past me, toward the church, and said nothing more. Christmas Eve arrived cold and still. The village looked peaceful in a way that felt rehearsed. Lights glowed in windows. Candles lined the church path. People walked together, not alone, voices low, steps measured. The church doors stood wide open. Inside, the air smelled of wax and damp stone. I stood near the back, close to the exit. At midnight, the bells rang once, then stopped. The priest hesitated. His hands shook slightly as he began the Mass anyway. No one spoke. No one laughed. Everyone followed the words like they had memorized them for safety rather than faith. Then the doors creaked. A man stepped inside. I did not recognize him, but my body reacted before my mind did. My stomach tightened. My skin prickled. He wore an old coat, thin and dark at the hem, as if it had been dragged through wet earth. Mud clung to his boots, leaving footprints that did not fade. He walked down the center aisle. No one stopped him. No one acknowledged him. He sat alone in the front pew. The priest did not look at him again. When the Mass ended, people left in silence. No greetings, no wishes of peace, just controlled movement, like everyone knew exactly when to go. As I passed the man, I felt a sudden cold, like breath against my neck. He did not turn his head. Outside, the bell rang once as I crossed the graveyard. Just once. On the walk home, I heard footsteps behind me. Slow, careful. When I stopped, they stopped. When I turned, the road was empty. At my house, the back door stood slightly open. I had no intention of attending the service, but it seemed like I had no choice. The air felt thick with an unspoken understanding. The church called me, or rather, it felt like I had no other option but to obey. At dusk, I found myself walking toward the church again. The night was quiet, and the sky hung low with a cold mist. The usual village sounds were missing. No dogs barking, no voices in the streets. Just the eerie quiet of a town that seemed to hold its breath. And in the distance, I could already hear the bells. They rang once, then twice, and then a third time. I stood at the entrance of the graveyard, staring at the church doors. They were wide open, just as they had been the night before. I hesitated but found my legs moving forward, as though they were controlled by something outside of myself. Inside, the church was filled with people, but the atmosphere felt heavy, suffocating. The air was thick with the smell of wax and incense, the candles flickering dimly. I could hear the low murmur of voices, soft prayers, whispers that seemed to echo off the walls, even though no one was speaking. And then I saw him again. The man in the dark coat was sitting in the front pew, just as he had the night before. His face was obscured by shadows, but I could feel his eyes on me, burning into my skin. My stomach tightened. There was something deeply wrong about him, something unnatural. I felt like I should leave, turn around, run, but I couldn't. I forced myself to look away, but the man's presence lingered, pressing against me, suffocating me. The priest continued the service, but there was no warmth in his words, no comfort in his gestures. The Mass was a mechanical thing, a ritual that had to be completed. The priest's hands shook again as he raised the chalice, his eyes darting nervously to the door, where the man in the coat sat motionless. The bells rang again, a deep, resonant sound that filled the entire church, vibrating in my chest. The air seemed to grow colder, the shadows lengthening, twisting, and then, as if on cue, the man stood and walked toward the door. No one looked at him. No one moved. I followed him outside, unable to stop myself. I needed to know. I needed to see what would happen next. The streets were deserted, except for the man who walked ahead of me. His footsteps were muffled, but I knew he could hear mine. I could feel the distance between us closing, my breath shallow, my heart pounding. When I reached the gate to the churchyard, he stopped and turned around. The cold mist swirled around his feet. Without a word, he pointed toward the forest. And then, the bells rang again. Once, twice, 3 times. And then I understood. The church doors were open for a reason. They weren't just for anyone. They were for those who needed to be let in. And once they had entered, they would never leave. A sudden gust of wind swept through the graveyard, and in the blink of an eye, the man disappeared. The cold air rushed in, and the bells rang for the final time. The silence that followed was deafening. I stumbled backward, my head spinning. The mist seemed to close in on me. the sound of the bells still echoing in my ears. I turned and ran, not stopping until I was back at my house, my chest heaving with every breath. The door was still open, just as it had been the night before, but this time I didn't go inside. I stood at the door, staring into the house, and for the first time, I felt the weight of what my mother's notebook had warned me about. Do not go out alone after the bells. The bells rang once more, and I knew, deep down, that the doors were never meant to be closed. Not really. And if you left, the village would never let you go.
Thanks for watching. Like, comment, and subscribe. Terramouth.